Justin, great to see you as always. Your reaction to this deal to come up with a longer-term deal later?
Let me give you a short-term reaction and a longer run. The short-term reaction is this is very good news. Our tariffs on China were previously so high it was effectively an embargo. We don't actually have to travel to Geneva for the US government to decide to cut the rate at which it taxes Americans for importing goods from China, but I'm glad that it did. And it's going to create a whole lot of calm for the next few days. The medium run thing to worry about is at the moment the half-life of a tariff announcement from the White House is around 6 to 8 days. So as encouraged as I am that this is the movement, the direction in which it's moving, I'm not sure that that businesses can be confident that we're going to hit the more harmonious times that we had prior to this administration.
The director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, says that China made certain concessions when it came to allowing U.S. exporters to enter the Chinese market or certain aspects of the Chinese market. I wonder what you make of that. Is that a win that the White House can point to justify levying these tariffs to begin with?
Oh, it's not a win and it's not a justification, but more to the point, when the White House says we got some concessions, but I'm not telling you what they are, they told us this about the Britain-UK deal, and it turns out that the UK-US deal, that was actually not a deal. It was an agreement to have an agreement at some point in the future. So if it's not written down and signed and they're not willing to show us that, then I'm not sure I believe it.
I do wonder what you think might make some of these tariffs worth it. In other words, what your guideposts are for justifying the trade war that this White House has launched, if they do, in fact, make it so that supply chains are reconfigured and the U.S. is less reliant on China, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is suggesting the administration will continue to pursue. Do you see that as a win?
Boris, let's not tie ourselves up in knots trying to make sense of something that we can't make sense of. Look, every time the administration's moved towards more tariffs, the markets have fallen. They're very unhappy about this. They think it undermines the profitability of American business. Every time the administration walks back, markets cheer. They think that that's useful economic policy, as does most of the economics establishment. Look, the long-run damage here, I think, is really worth emphasizing. Let me take you back. Remember during COVID, global supply chains became fractured, and there became a lot of talk that what we needed was more robust, reliable supply partners. There was talk of onshoring and friendshoring. Well, this time, something similar is happening, but it's happening in other countries, and it's not caused by a virus, it's caused by the White House. The United States has shown itself to be an unreliable trading partner, and more to the point, its tariff policies change day to day and week to week, and as a result, our foreign trading partners are looking for more robust, more stable, more reliable trading partners. And so already they're starting to diversify away from the United States.
If the next dozen plus deals look like what's been struck between the U.S. and the U.K. and the U.S. and China, what do you imagine this is going to do to the global economy? Is it actually going to affect some great change?
Not much. So let me characterize the British deal, because I think it's the one that sets the standard for the rest of the world, except for China. The British deal is basically the US has decided, President Trump has decided, in fact, that tariffs on every other country around the world will be 10%. I want you to put that in a big sheet of paper. Let's make it 48-point font. And next to that, there's a little asterisk. The little asterisk says, if you're willing to come to the Rose Garden and put on a dog and pony show and make the president feel good, we'll make a few little carve-outs for you as well. But when you look at the details of the British deal, the 10% is the most important part. The asterisk turns out to be incredibly small. There really were no economically important carve-outs. And so I think other countries around the world right now are looking at this and they're understanding that the US government doesn't want Americans buying stuff from them, and so they may be looking elsewhere for trading partners.
U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports will be cut from 145% to 30%. And now, obviously, that's a massive cut. 30%, though, is still a huge number. It's higher than Smoot-Hawley on average. The 1930 law, which raised tariffs and sparked a global trade war, deepened the Great Depression, and is blamed by many for the beginning of a world war. And for now, the pause on the tariff, such that it is a 90-day pause for more negotiation. The chief Asia economist at Capital Economics tells the Wall Street Journal tonight, quote, China has successfully called Trump's bluff. And while Trump, of course, is celebrating the deal as a big win, the Chinese line on social media fits more in line with what that economist says. Quotes like Trump chickened out, Trump kneeled, China rejected America's tariff bullying and pushed the U.S. to the negotiating table. Well done, China. Nicely played. Out front now, Gene Soroka. He is the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, which is the busiest port in the United States. You know, our Nick Watt has been going to the port, you know, again and again over days and talking to workers as you started to see the dramatic drop off, right, in cargo. You know, it was numbers and then it became reality at your port. So, you know, we've got new video of the port tonight. Obviously, it's not as busy as usual. Now, nobody expected Trump to do this, right? To just back off and drop it by the amount that he did. So I guess the question to you is this: how bad was it that he did something this dramatic?
Well, Aaron, I think the conversation really got amplified by the media, by folks in the industry, people that went and visited Washington. And when you saw the stark reality of cargo at the biggest port dropping by more than 30% last week, slamming on the brakes, China cargo, I think it got a lot of people's attention.
So when you're looking at that 30% drop, okay, I mean, that's a world you probably never expected to see again. When I say again, COVID would have been the only other time you would have seen it. Now that this has been announced, you're getting this drop from 145 to 30. 30 is still massive. You know, if we were at the beginning of April talking about 30, it would have been really bad. But when it was 145, it doesn't sound so bad. But it's a 90-day delay, sort of. Does that change the world?
I don't think so. And Aaron, 30% is on top of other pieces that have been added, right? So now where we find ourselves is that's a little bit elevated still for a lot of people. And 90 days is not a long time in our industry. Now, there may be some products that really have to get out. Think of medical supplies, cancer drugs, some other things. But what I'm getting back from Los Angeles today, and we're still only hours into digesting this, is that folks are doing the math. What does it mean if I buy now? Is it better than if I had to cancel?
Say back to school, say Christmas, all those orders.
Summer fashions as well as that, right? And May is traditionally the time when all those purchase orders go in for Christmas and year-end holidays. Some people are going to make some pretty big bets right now.
Right, and it can be kind of scary. All right, so I got my whiteboard out. We've been doing this. So the budget lab at Yale, so this is even after this announcement. So you're going from 145% to 30%. They are still saying that the average prices are going to go up by 2%, okay, in the long run. And that, to them, they say that this is going to be the average middle-class family's increase per year is $2,337. That's the increase in cost. That's with this dramatic decline from 145% to 30%. That's still a massive amount of money.
Every retailer I talked to said they're going to do their level best to pass on the tariff cost to the consumers.
Right.
Parts suppliers are saying, I'm going to pass it on to the factory. Now, obviously, there's some work to do around trying to find efficiencies, and maybe if the company can use a little bit of margin compression in that equation, they will try to, but it's going right through.
So it's going right through. So they're not trying to eat it. I mean, I know some of the car manufacturers with really big price increases are trying to eat some of it. But if you're low margin retail business, you can't. So then where do we go from here? I mean, you talk about, and you know, Dan Ives has been in here. He's been tracking this data every single week and seeing the drop. And we've been seeing the ghost ships, right? Or they've been skipping port because there's nothing to pick up, so that they're continuing on their sail route, but half empty or less than that. What do the ships look like that are coming into port?
Well, they're fewer than they were. So we're going to welcome 16 ships again this week to Los Angeles. 11 of those will have made a port call in China, but another 4 from China have been completely canceled. So by the end of this month, we'll be down 20% in the number of ship calls and probably about 25% in the volume of cargo. All that means is less jobs on the docks, the truckers, and the warehouse folks. And that happens right away. So where are we on that in terms of the job loss? I mean, this is the intermodal industry, right? When you have a cargo container come and it can be popped right onto a train and can move, or a truck. What's happening? It'll lag by a week, but we started to get a glimpse of this last Friday. There were maybe 400 dock workers that didn't go out to their normal jobs last Friday. We had only 8 ships in port. Over the weekend, 6 and 7. Today was 9 ships. So there are fewer job opportunities for the dock workers. This week, we'll start to see the truckers haul fewer containers. If they were hauling 4 or 5 per day last week, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 this week. The volume drop was that precipitous.
And an immediate income impact on
Absolutely.
all of these jobs.
Well, it's important to note that while the baseline may have shifted, that shift includes tariffs that are still at a very high level. In fact, when you look at where those rates currently stand, well, in January of 2025, before the Trump administration took office, the overall tariff rate was around 2.4%. In April, at the height post-Liberation Day, as the president called it, 28%. Where they stand now, still 17.8%, roughly 15% higher than they were before President Trump took office. That is still very high, and that's still going to have an impact on consumers. Not as dramatic as it would have been before this pause, which, according to the Yale Budget Lab, which has been tracking this stuff very closely, it would have been $3,443 for the average middle-class family. That is now $2,237 for the average middle-class family. That is not nothing, Jake. There are still significant tariffs in place as these negotiations over the course of the next 90 days play out.
So, Phil, the Trump administration obviously argues that the end goal of these tariffs is for America to make more money. Is that happening in any way?
Yeah, revenue, a key component the president often talks about, and that is actually playing out, as you would expect it would, given where rates have been. In fact, in the month of April, $16 billion in customs duty revenue. That's 130% higher than April of last year. And in fact, it's the largest monthly sum in at least a decade, perhaps even longer than that. The question, of course, Jake, is who's actually paying for that? U.S. importers pay tariffs. Oftentimes that gets transferred to the consumers. The administration claims that's not going to be the case this time around. No question that money is coming in. Who's actually financing that money, though? Still an open question as these negotiations play out, Jake.
People are saying that this is a loss. Trump has lost this trade deal at the final moment. And he's lost it for a few reasons. One, economists are saying it's not actually going to solve the major issues at hand. Yes, it's, I guess, better than the absolute disaster of 24 hours ago, wherever we were before. The markets are up for a reason, although we should say that these markets, when Trump won, all went up because they were too stupid to realize what was coming, and the capitalist class of the United States, the people who own most of the stocks and therefore move the markets more than regular people, they got it wrong, and then they quickly crashed when they realized they made a mistake. Maybe they're making a mistake again, but the bigger point is it's still a gigantic tariff relative to what existed a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, under Biden, even under the previous Trump administration. But also, this is China calling Trump's bluff a little bit. Because again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but tell me in the comments if you guys agree about how important this is, and if you've been telling, say, your friends and family about this, who maybe were soft Trump supporters, and maybe didn't understand what the tariffs were about. Again, it was supposed to be about ending deals forever. There were supposed to be no more deals at all with China. Though Trump was like, China, we're going to stop China forever. We're going to cancel we're basically going to get rid of most of our trade with China. We're going to make all the things we buy from China now in the United States, and no matter how much China begs and pleads us, we're not going to bail China out. That's Trump's language. I'm not trying to agree with his position. And then, of course, we knew that wouldn't work. And then China called his bluff. And now Trump, even though he hasn't bent all the way back, has lost this deal. Because by simply negotiating even a little bit, he's already broken his original premise.